All right, let's dive into two movements that absolutely transformed the 18th century world, the Enlightenment and the Great Awakening. You see, one was a total revolution of the mind, while the other was a complete revolution of the soul.
And that, right there, is the big question, isn't it? How on earth could two ideas that seem like they're at war with each other, one all about logic and science, the other about deep personal faith, end up lighting the fuse for the very same event, the American Revolution? It sounds impossible, but stick with me, we're going to break it all down. So, first up, let's talk about the revolution of the mind, the Enlightenment. Seriously, this movement changed how people thought about, well, pretty much everything.
To really get how huge this was, you gotta look at what came before. After the Dark Ages, yeah, the Renaissance was amazing, bringing back art and literature in a big way. But the Enlightenment, that was a totally different beast. It was a massive, fundamental shift toward using logic, science, and new political ideas to run the world.
So what was it really? The Enlightenment was a philosophical revolution. The big thinkers of the day basically stood up and said, you know what, we're done with just accepting superstition and tradition. They believed logic and science were the best tools for understanding everything, and, this is the really key part, for challenging the idea that kings had absolute power.
And this way of thinking unleashed all these radical new ideas. Suddenly, things we just assume are normal today, like human rights, equality, democracy, were being debated for the first time. Every single one of these ideas was a direct attack on the old way of doing things, the monarchy and the official church in charge. And it didn't take long for these ideas to hop on a boat and make their way over to the American colonies.
The people behind this were, genuine revolutionaries. You had guys like John Locke, who came up with the idea that a government needs the consent of the governed. Sound familiar? Yeah. He's also the guy who talked about our natural rights, life, liberty, and property. Then you have Montesquieu, who argued for separating government powers to protect freedom. And get this, he even said women were perfectly capable of being in government. Back then, these ideas were absolutely earth-shattering. But this is where the story gets really interesting. This new obsession with science and pure reason, well, have created a totally unexpected side effect for a lot of people, a full-blown spiritual crisis.
It turns out, for a lot of folks, this move towards cold, hard logic just felt empty. As Enlightenment thinkers started to question the role of big, institutional religion, it just left this hole in people's lives. And you know what they say, society abhors a vacuum.
And the American colonies were the perfect kindling for a new kind of fire. A lot of colonists felt that church, especially the official Church of England, had become stuffy and impersonal. People weren't even going as much anymore. And remember, unlike England with its one-state church, the colonies were this big melting pot of different faiths. You had Puritans, Quakers, Baptists, you name it. The stage was set for something big.
And that something big was our second movement, the Great Awakening. This time, it wasn't a revolution of the mind. Nope, this was a passionate, emotional, spiritual revolution. The whole message of the Great Awakening was super personal. It started with this idea that everyone is born a sinner, and you have to confess to be saved. But here's the really game-changing part. They preached that anyone, no matter who you were, could have a direct emotional connection with God. It made faith a personal journey, not something controlled by a stuffy old church or, the government.
And this message was spread by these unbelievably charismatic preachers. There was Jonathan Edwards, often called the father of the movement, who gave these incredibly intense sermons. And then you had George Whitefield, a minister from Britain, who was basically a traveling rock star. He would draw these massive, diverse crowds. We're talking common people, slaves, Native Americans, all across the colonies.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got two huge, but totally different movements happening at the same time. One is all about reason. The other is all about faith. So how in the world did they both end up in the same place?
And this, right here, is the key that unlocks the whole thing. Even though they came from opposite directions, both movements were aimed at the exact same target: authority. The Enlightenment thinkers, they challenged the authority of the king. The Great Awakening preachers, they challenged the authority of the Church of England. The bottom line is, both movements taught ordinary colonists that it was okay to question the big, powerful institutions that had always run their lives. So here it is, the most important point. Whether it was through logic or through faith, both the Enlightenment and the Great Awakening ended up sending the exact same powerful message. They empowered the individual. They told people, hey,
You have the right to think for yourself and to make your own choices. You don't have to just blindly follow what some king or bishop tells you to do.
And when you put those two together, the result was world-changing. People learned it was okay to question power. Power was essentially pulled away from the big, centralized church and state and put right back into the hands of ordinary people. And that created the perfect ideological storm, the rich soil where the American Revolution could finally take root and grow.
So I'll leave you with this to think about. When we talk about government by the consent of the governed, or the separation of powers, or when we talk about the immense value we place on personal freedom in challenging authority, how much of that comes directly from these two historical movements? Their ideas are still all around us, shaping our world in ways we don't even realize. It's a pretty powerful legacy, don't you think?